This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, season 6, episode 4. I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Well, before we jump into today's conversation, titled Good Samaritan or Murderer. Oh my goodness, I can't even believe we're titling this. Anyway, let us thank each of our listeners and viewers. Let me go back. Let's go from the top. Just scratch that. Take 2. This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, season 6, episode 4. I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Irene, before we jump into today's conversation titled Good Samaritan or Murderer, let us thank each of our listeners and viewers. This 6th season is all because of you. Thank you for listening to us on the various podcast apps and for watching the actual live recording of the podcast on our YouTube channel. We are grateful for your support, your encouragement, your feedback, your reviews, and your comments. Thank you so much for sharing the podcast with others.
And as always, I send a tsunami of thanks to our listeners and fans, and I can never send enough thanks to our brilliant producers, Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
As protesters piled onto the platform at 63rd and Lexington, they stood in the doors of the train cars, stood in the faces of police officers, and then fists started flying. Police officers began taking down and arresting demonstrators.
On May 1st, 2023, 30-year-old Jordan Neely was on the F train in New York City. Neely, a black, shelter-insecure Michael Jackson impersonator, apparently became, and I quote, hostile and erratic, end quote, yelling that he was hungry and thirsty. Neely was apparently throwing trash at people when 24-year-old ex-Marine Daniel Penny approached Neely from behind and wrestled him onto the ground in a chokehold that went on for 15 minutes. Irene, I want to be honest with our listeners and viewers. I do not and I did not want to talk about this story, but the more you and I conferred, I realized that we have a responsibility to leverage our platform and our voices on behalf of justice. And in this season that we live in, the only way for this situation to be given the serious attention by the jurisprudence system is for as many of us to make as much noise as possible. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, I had to push you on this, Emmett. I know
You
that
did. That's true.
you like to go happy. But this is very personal for me, particularly being a New Yorker. It is nothing out of the ordinary to see platform and train performers in the New York City subway. And seldom, very seldom, have you ever heard of any of them being violent? But the video and I thank that Good Samaritan for capturing it. That video, I hope will have the same kind of effect that the George Floyd video had, because what we see here is that deep fault line about race, homelessness, crime, and how some people are treated differently by the police as well as white citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, last week we talked about Ralph Y'all. So what was the takeaway? I kept thinking, you can't make a mistake like knock on the wrong door, as we clearly saw with the 16-year-old Carl Y'all. You can't be struggling with mental illness. You can't question the police when stopped. You can't whistle or supposedly look at a white woman. That's a clear iconic iconic case with Emmett Till. And you can't be human here. I think the problem that gets me about this here, and he walked away. They said it was a chokehold, it wasn't a homicide case, but this is what you have to understand. New Marines, it was a chokehold. It reminded me of Eric Gardner
Mm-hmm.
saying, "I can't breathe," and depending on what news coverage you get, you hear that Mr. Neely was yelling and struggling, but Marines now are trained to apply a different kind of chokehold. It's called a blood choke.
Mm-hmm.
And when done properly, Emmett, it cuts off the blood and oxygen to the brain for at least 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And so supposedly they supposed to know that with this, if you squeeze the person's windpipe, you know, too much, too hard, that can lead to not only serious injury, but obviously to death. But I think what bothers me about it, that when you hear about this case, many people says that Neely was thrashing and kicking for at least 2 minutes before his body went limp. And Emmett, I kept saying, what must that be like to have your neck, now not your foot, but your neck
Mm-hmm.
around a living, you're under the person, so you really feel that person, the life force of that person, to be holding that person in such a way that then they just go limp. What must that feel like? But according to the city medical examiner, he died from a compression of the neck. That's the chokehold. And I just find it interesting that they can't see that as a murder. But this is what gets me about it here. Um is it vigilantism, really? Is it the Good Samaritan? But this is what we learn in many ways, that white privilege
Right.
affords people the opportunity, white people, to deputize. I mean, they're deputized by virtue of whiteness, so they can control and police the behavior of blackness. We've seen this. We got this term now out in the public lexicon called Karen. We saw the incident with the bird watcher in Central Park. We've seen the incident with the Black brothers at Starbucks in Philly. We saw the incident of a Black family at a public park trying to do a barbecue. And we can never forget the 2009 incident with Professor Henry Louis Gates, who gets arrested for trying to get into his house. So the question it raises for me, what do you see when you see Black men? Really, what do you see?
Well, man, I can't even answer that. I will tell you this though. I was trained in martial arts in high school, and I was probably a couple months away from my black belt in jujitsu, which is often the martial arts that police officers and also military folks use. And one of my favorite moves, because I'm a musician,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do a lot of punching with my hands because I don't want to break my fingers. So one of my
Okay.
favorite moves was a sleeper chokehold.
Oh.
Because between 30 seconds and 90 seconds, if you apply it right, the person loses consciousness and
Wow.
you're done. So to think that this person was in a chokehold, and that actually looked like the application of a sleeper chokehold for 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
you're not trying to stop anybody. You're not trying to disable anybody. You're not trying to, de-escalate the situation. For 15 minutes, you're actually trying to take somebody out. That's way too long to try to be de-escalating a situation. And then when we think about what we're understanding now from family members, the aunt has
Right.
come on and said that as a result of Jordan Neely experiencing his mother's murder when he was 14 years old and had to testify in the case against the mother's boyfriend, and also was placed in foster home, that he developed depression and
Oh,
schizophrenia
of
and
course.
post-traumatic stress disorder.
That's right.
And then the father has come out and said, obviously he was calling for help. My son didn't
Yeah.
deserve to die because he needed help. So at what point, do we realize that you're not a good Samaritan if you take somebody's life?
And the thing about it is, there were passengers on the train. One in particular who says this: "You don't have to catch a murder." This is one of the passengers yelling, to the Marine. He says, "You got a hell of a chokehold on the man." So
Yeah.
it's not like, even if he was caught up in the moment, that moment was broken by virtue of that guy saying, "Look, dude, listen, look at what you're doing here." But you know what the Marine did? I won't call him by his name. What he did was, at the end, when Mr. Neely's life went limp, he got up, looked for his cap,
Yeah.
said nothing. So, that says a lot about what he thought about Black life, if he even saw it as Black life. I need to say this about Mr. Neely, the Michael Jackson impersonator. Once again, we're with a slight brother. He's
Hmm.
he's not menacing. He
Hmm.
was not fighting back. He did not hit the Mariner. I
That's
call
right.
him,
Yeah.
so I don't know, what was he really trying to do? What was he really trying to do? Because his attorney says, well, he was protecting himself and passengers. From what?
Well,
Just the presence of a black man.
here's
And
the
I
thing.
need to say this, on those trains in New York City, yeah, at those certain hours, whether early morning or you're coming from work, okay, the last thing you want to hear sometime is some singer or
Right.
some dancer. I
Right.
really do get that.
Right.
You know what? They pose no threat. They're a nuisance. I
Yeah.
need to say that. They are a nuisance, but they pose no threat.
Irene, I'm sad for, so many people in this situation. But the more I think about these passengers who are now complicit in the, however you want to articulate the death, the murder, however you want to talk about that. But did nobody think that they should do something?
Well, they did. See, when you look at the video, see, apparently the mariner, okay, or the the ex-mariner here, he had him down on the floor, okay, and so Mr. Neely was really on top of him.
Mm-hmm.
But there were two other guys that was holding Mr. Neely down. So so the marina gets well, not even charged. I mean, he's the one that takes his life, but there were others who jumped in.
Well, what I'm saying is the bystanders who just sat there and watched this man die before them. I don't even know how you sleep at night. I mean,
No, you
you just
can't.
you just witnessed a murder of somebody who
But
actually,
yeah. But there's a moment, Emmett, I need to say, on those trains, it's crowded. Okay, it's crowded. You worry about other people jumping you, because the question it raised for me is like, who are these other two guys holding Mr. Neely down? Why did they need to get involved? At what point did any of them recognize, because obviously somebody yelled, one of the passengers, yo, dude, that's a hell of a chokehold. Do you want to murder the person, or do you, or apprehend? And so I just feel that what happens here is that for many people, it's hard to discern what's going on. I'm sure they're afraid of their own life. But I think the question for me that is very, very deep here is the way in which white people are deputized to patrol and control Black life. He felt privileged to do so, and he can guise it under the notion of, I'm a good Samaritan, because it's quite obvious he has yet. This happened May 1st. Where are we today, Emmett? We had May, I don't
today
know,
is what,
11th?
May 9th or something.
Something like that.
May
May
11th.
Okay.
And more protesters have gotten arrested.
That's right.
than the murderer.
Than the murderer. So what does that say? And did you notice the video of the people who are getting arrested?
Black
the
folk.
color of the people who are getting arrested.
Black folk. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sends a very salient message that Black lives don't matter, even in New York City, a world city that has a large Black population, and, by the way, has a Black DA as well as a Black mayor. And it also says another thing too, which you wouldn't know this. You have to be who are the people that really ride the F train? See, that's another thing.
Well, we gonna come back to that after this break.
Okay, because that's also about race and class as well.
Well, we need you to school us on the F train, because I know the A train, but because Duke Ellington sung about it. But I want to learn about the F train.
They're not singing about the F train, I assure you. That's not a song to be sung.
This the All Rev'd Up podcast. We will be right back.
The father of Jordan Neely was too distraught to say a word, but Neely's godfather, Barry Nibbs, spoke out for him and against the man who caused Neely to take his last breath.
This individual seemed like he's a vigilante now, and them days are over with.
This is the All Rev'd Up podcast. We are back. You just heard a clip from PIX 11 News from May 5th, 2023. You heard the voice of Mr. Barry Nibbs, who's the godfather of Jordan Neely, as Jordan Neely's father, Andre Zachary, was unable to speak. Irene, you were giving us a history lesson or a current event lesson on the F train, and who are the folks who ride that train. Why don't you talk to us here?
Well, I just want to say this: in any city that has a subway system, a train system, we know where the white people reside. We know where the people of color reside. The F train. Let me just give you two areas: Jamaica, Queens, Coney Island. Okay, that talks about but that talks about a certain class
Mm-hmm.
and race of people. Similarly, here in terms of Boston, here we know who rides what line. We
Mm-hmm.
know that the orange line, like the orange line, which is the F train. We know the people who ride the orange line. Lack of service. It goes to the outskirts of the city. It's already deemed as more, crime and problems with the police and more policing going on. So my problem with this here is twofold. We need to tell the truth that this white guy, for whatever reason, was on the F train, probably just felt uncomfortable seeing all these black and brown and Asian people on the train. And here's this guy. Some people, and I need to say now, these street performers, these train performers are a nuisance, but nobody ever feels the need to kill them. You do want to shut them up, and you do shoo them away. And the interesting thing that people will say about Neely, he would, if you shoo him away, he'd go away. He'd stop doing the Michael Jackson impersonation. So my point is that what we need to look at is how race has showed itself once again, where now white citizens, because I think it was the Godfather, the father said, the day of vigilante is gone. No, it's not. It is just it has morphed into something very different when we talk about the Karens, when we now talk about this ex-Marine guy.
Well, the first clip that we played at the top of our episode was from Eyewitness News, ABC 7, from May 7th, 2023. And you're absolutely right about the race of the folks who were involved and perhaps who were protesting. And, is this another scenario where we need white allies to show up, to speak up in order for something to happen? Or will justice eventually come forward because of the reality that I don't even know how this ex-Marine could even suggest that he was fearful of his life. I mean,
Please,
he disproved that by
okay,
holding the
really?
man down for 15 minutes. I mean,
Okay.
so
He's not 84-year-old Mr. Lester. Okay,
right,
okay,
right.
Who says this 14-year-old or 16-year-old kid comes, at the dead of night and knocks at my door. So I mean, clearly, this guy knew what he was tackling and also knew he could take him out.
Yeah, of course he did. Of course he did. And so let's also deal with the obvious that Jordan Neely was not well mentally.
That's right.
And at what point do we honor the diverse ability of our fellow human beings or fellow citizens or fellow, however you want to call our neighbors, let's use that terminology, and seek help on their behalf rather than taking their life because they're not behaving the way that you want them to behave?
Well, the interesting thing, Emmett, I'm so glad you said this. I mean, it does say we've seen numerous incidents with people who are mentally challenged, Black people who mothers have called to say, my son is acting erratic. Neighbors have called, and all they want is to de-escalate the situation, and the cop just escalated, and the child or the person loses their life here. I think what we need to really just own up to is that we don't have the right to be human. That's what it really says here.
Wow.
We don't have the right. Listen, well, I mean, what is it? You can't knock on the door, but I mean, you're not a burglar. You can't sit in Starbucks. You can't bird watch in Central Square. You definitely can't be mentally ill and a Michael Jackson, impersonator. And I need to say this young man had family. And he also had community. The community are many of the people who ride the train, and Mr. Neely is on it. He is a regular nuisance. I need to say this. It's sort of like, here he is again. These people, they're ill. The social workers knew him. The police knew him. The person who did not know him is the man who killed him.
Yeah, I mean that, you go from that to just the realization that one could even suggest that as a result of me being afraid of this young man, 30 years old, that I have the right to
Mhm.
take him out.
Take them out.
I mean, just, and so it's not even, it's like self-deputization. So no longer do you call 911. All the transit systems have their own police, that are able to come out, relatively quickly. So no longer do you call for assistance. You just do what we got guns all over the place. Now we got ex-Marines putting chokeholds on people. I
Citizens
mean,
now. Let's just say
yeah,
that these are
yeah,
citizens. But I need to say that a lot of these ex-Mariners, these ex-Marine guys, also join our police force.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay? All right? They join our police force, and some of them will also at January 6th insurrection.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
many of them, a lot of them also are white supremacists.
yeah. So what happened to the days of citizens arrest? Remember those? Remember when you can do a citizens arrest and you kind of hold somebody until the police come and then you explain to them what's going on. I mean, you don't try to take people out. I mean, come on.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Today you do. Yes,
Mm.
yes, you do. And what I appreciate about the folks that are protesting, I hope this becomes another George Floyd moment in terms of bringing to the public's attention just how caged in Black men are in America.
Mm.
Just to really get an understand and just run it. I mean, because this is following what 2 weeks after Ralph
Yeah, yeah.
Neal,
Ralph
Yarl,
Yarl. Yeah.
yeah, Ralph Yarl, right? I
Mhm.
mean, look, 2 weeks after, really, and we have to bring attention to it. And I'm glad that there is this kind of protest because I'm worried what we will become numb and desensitized to it. Oh, just another Black man gone,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
some will say not too soon.
Wow. Wow. I don't even know where to go here, so I'm just gonna say my final word because I'm really I'm glad that we spent the time bringing awareness to this topic, but I mean my goodness, just for the 4 episodes
Yeah.
we've had, if I think back of what we talked about over the
Yeah,
four
it's been
episodes in this sixth
been
season,
dark.
it's been very
Yeah.
dark.
But I hope
So
for him. I hope for him and his. I hope that he rests in power because one of the things people don't understand about these performers, they many times, depending on the mood, they do bring us joy.
yeah,
They bring
absolutely.
they bring us joy. And this is a Michael Jackson, and they said a very good Michael Jackson.
He was good. I saw some videos.
Impersonator here,
Yeah,
and that was his gift and his joy in the world, and his gift to us.
yeah. Well, let me share this. I recently heard an NPR story that has had me thinking for the past few days. It spoke about a time during the 1970s, after the Vietnam War, where a great majority in our nation were convinced that world peace was possible. Now, clearly, this was prior to the Gorbachev-Reagan standoff, but again, there was a moment where Americans truly believed in world peace. Now, many are convinced currently that the mention of world peace is an aberration and that we should devolve our thinking to the social Darwinian ideals of survival of the fittest, or perhaps survival of the most armed, or perhaps survival of the most fearful, or perhaps survival of the most fragile. When our excuse for taking human life is fear for one's own life by someone else, unarmed, mentally unwell, we have truly devolved. Good Samaritans don't kill, they help. Hard stop, period. And that, beloved, is my final word today. Good Samaritans don't kill, they help. I know perhaps it's not as spiritual or perhaps as religious as I usually am, but it sure is something that needs to be said and certainly needs to be heard. So for the third time, Good Samaritans don't kill, they help. Ashe
Ashe.
and amen.
Amen.
All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs. Our amazing producers are Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Music for this episode is from Reverend Price's son and musical prodigy, Emmett G. Price IV. All Rev'd Up is distributed by GBH.
Additional thanks to Bob Kempf, Elizabeth O'Brien, May He, Devin Robbins, Meredith Neerman, and Zach Waldman.
If you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us at All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Feel free to send us a note, a question, or a comment to allrevduppod@gmail.com. We'll be back